Hello friends, welcome back to the vlog. In today's video we are going to be going through my August reading wrap-up that is spoiler filled. So this month was kind of a bad reading month for me, and bad is relative. Whenever I have had some months where I've read 12, 13, 14 books, and then months like this month where I read 4.5 books. And I say it's relative because any reading is good reading. If you've read one book, if you read 2 books, 4 books, 10 books, whatever, any kind of reading is good. And if you didn't get to read any books this month, that's fine too. In my personal opinion and based on my sort of track record, I feel like this was a bit of a low reading month for me. The main culprit being that I had COVID this month, and when I'm sick, I am worthless. I don't want to read, sure. I don't want to play on my phone. I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to do anything. I want to get in my bed, turn the lights off, turn the TV off, and sleep. All of that aside, let's get into the books that I did read this month. So the first book that I finished in August is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries, which I gave 5 stars. So the premise of this book is that there is a researcher named Emily Wilde who goes to this Scandinavian, I think, country where she is researching the Fae. She wants to go and talk to all the little Fae creatures that they call hidden ones. She wants to interact with the different townsfolk to see what stories they have about the different Fae encounters that they've had. And initially she's going on this trip by herself, but one of her colleagues named Wilde shows up, and he is there to help her with this research. But she thinks he's there to steal her spotlight because he's this super charming, likable guy, and she is very sort of introverted and awkward and cares more about her sort of research and career than interpersonal relationships. So, very quintessential awkward girl and charismatic guy sort of trope. As Emily is going about her researching, talking to the little Fae and whatnot, she discovers that Wilde himself is a Fae. But not just a Fae, he's a high Fae. He's been cursed to be perceived as a human until someone figures out that he's a Fae. And once they've done that, then he gets his powers back. So she figures this out about Wilde. They're going on a few different excursions for the research. They're trying to do some things to help out the town with their Fae problems. And that's kind of what happens on and on and on until we get to this situation where Emily has touched this cursed tree that's captured this old Fae king that's been trapped there for several hundred years, and she ends up letting him go. Well, the winter Fae king is like, "Oh, Emily, you're gonna be my wife. I'm gonna gift that to you. What more could you want than to be my wife?" And then the end is basically just Wilde and others from the village trying to rescue Emily from this Fae king. And it's funny because that ending, when I describe it, sounds like something that would feel very eventful. It's funny because that ending just to me felt like it was no stakes. Even though, we're trying to get Emily out. We're trying to save her. It just felt very da da da. So that kind of reflects a lot of what I think about the book on the whole, is that it is beautiful, and some of these scenes and descriptions are absolutely gorgeous. And I think that it's just a very well written book. Heather Fawcett does a very good job of writing just a visually descriptive book. But it lends itself to that sort of quote unquote problem. If you like it, you like it. That quote unquote problem with cozy fantasy, and that it feels like there's no consequences to what's going to happen. All of that to say, I still give it 5 stars. So I really did like it, and I do want to read the sequel, Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I have a feeling that will be more about trying to help Wilde get back to his high Fae people, because at some point he declares his love for Emily, and she's like, "Oh, LOL. I guess I like you too." That is how I read it. Is very that. It's funny because the quote that I pulled out from my journal is, We'll name a time when it would be convenient for you to receive a declaration of love, because when Wendell is confessing his feelings to her, she's just like, now's not the best time. We've got things to do. So I thought that was pretty funny. I really did like how the romance sort of part of this book was very on the back burner. The point is Emily and her career and her research, and the romance subplot is just a little sprinkle, a little icing. And while us readers who want them to be together are very hip and with that, I like that she's still very career focused and he isn't gonna let no man mess up her goals. I did make a very cute spread for Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. Images off of Pinterest. One of my favorites is his eyes become very green when he laughs. You wonder if the color will spill from them like sap. Oh, I just love that. To peel back the carpeting of the world and tumble into the stars. Just like the phrasing is just so beautiful. I loved it. So here's our spread. The next book that I read in August is The Will of the Many by James Islington. You might have heard me talk a bit about that book in my 24-hour reading vlog, but man, oh man, was this a good book. Easily one of the easiest books to get 5 stars that I have read this year. I don't even know where to begin. So we have our main character. I'm going to call him V. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to pronounce his name, but V, who is a war refugee orphan. The book starts with him working in this prison as a way to, get money while he's living in this orphanage. But then he also has a side hustle where he goes and fights in this fight club. And he ends up beating this guy who's supposed to be way, way, way powers and powers and power levels higher than him. And that's bad news bears. And he gets kicked out of the fight club. He's sort of stressing out because he's like, how am I going to make this side money? Because he was trying to raise money to run away because he was about to age out of this orphanage. Well, all of these little things that happen right there at the beginning of the book are important because there's this guy who is higher up in the government, a Quintus is what he's referred to, who wants to adopt him. He's like, this guy is really smart. He could understand some languages that I was talking in. He can fight. I saw what he did at the fight club. And all of these things make him the perfect candidate to be my adopted son to go on this mission for me. Sidebar, this book's power structure is a lot like a pyramid scheme. You have the people on the bottom who are called octavi, and they're just basically like laborers, blue-collar type deal. And they cede their will up to Sextus, I think. Here's a chart that shows how power is seeded up for the will of the many. Keep that in mind. So he's adopted by this guy who's a Quintus, and his brother, the Quintus's brother, died while at this school that all the senator's children go to. And it's very sus. And so he wants to send V to this school to find out what's going on, to find out the tea about how his brother died, what's going on, because obviously something is afoot. And so V goes back home with him, has to do some training to try to, get prepped to go to the school because everyone else who has ever gone there has had all this training all their life before they go to the school, and V is just straight out the gutter. And so he's getting all this prep ahead of time. Little does the Quintus and everyone else know that V is actually the child of a former king of a different country that was overtaken by the hierarchy government, which is what runs this pyramid scheme of a society. And so he's already very well educated. That's why he can speak all the different languages, why he has combat training, all this different stuff. So he's set up in a pretty perfect position to infiltrate this school, hopefully come out of it on tip top, so then he can get in a position of government or whatever and get revenge for his family, which would be cool if that was what happens in the sequel. Some thoughts that I have on that. Anyway, he goes to the school. I'm not going to get into the details about everything that happens at the school. He levels up through the classes, pretty quickly and in very clever ways. Man is witty AF. And he's definitely got some plot armor. going for him, but he's the main character, so why wouldn't he? Meanwhile, there's this rebellion group who knows V's true identity as, his name is Diago, knows his true identity as Diago, the prince of this former kingdom, and God, so many things happen in this book. It's hard to remember it all when I read it at the beginning of the month. There's this resistance is trying to use him to meet their ends, and then the Quintus is trying to use him to meet his ends, and all the while V is trying to sort of play both sides, see what information he can get out of both sides and how he can use both sides. And then we get to the end where V is trying to do this competition that will make him the top of the class. Whoever wins this competition is the valedictorian, whatever they called the valedictorian in this book. And so we get to this competition to be the valedictorian, and V has this plan that while this competition is going on, he's going to sneak away to these ruins that he's discovered to figure out the tea about what happened to the Quintus's brother. He has to run through this maze that's super complicated, but he's been training all year to do it, which makes the principal seem sus, because why are they training to run this labyrinth that is in these ancient ruins that leads to God knows where? So V runs the labyrinth, makes it through, and then things get really confusing. In fact, I'm not exactly sure what happened, because all these undead people start coming and trying to, like, part of the crew, part of the ship, V, and he touches this magical object, and then he's like, oh, I gotta get out of here. I've got the knowledge or whatever, now I gotta get out of here, and he's running away, and a big wolf saves him, and then they get attacked by the rebellion people. All these side characters that I loved die. James Isling doesn't care about killing off comedic relief characters. And then he gets to the end and he's like, guys, I won. But he's like on his deathbed. I won. And then they're like, what part of the government do you want to be in? And he's like, he ends up choosing part of the government that neither the Quintus or the principal want him to join. And so it's like, what are you playing at? And I found that very confusing. I was like, why would he, he has a side. Someone's in the right. And he chooses neither of them. Heyo. We get to the epilogue, and it's like replaying the part after he has gone through the labyrinth and touches the artifact that gives him all the knowledge, except his soul is splitting, because when he wakes up this time, he's there with the Quintus's brother in some alternate reality dimension. And so I'm like, is the V that went back and won the competition in the hospital bed that chose the position in the government, is that the real V? Or is it the one that's in this alternate reality? Or is it some sort of multiverse paths diverging? I don't know. And so as soon as I finished this thing, I was like, where is book 2? It comes out in 2025. My summary just then probably didn't make any sense at all, but you just gotta read it. The thing is cuckoo bonkers, okay? And for it to be, at least on the Kindle version, it's 600 pages. So much happens, and it goes by so quickly. I feel like I read a few different stories in one book. There are so many themes, so many compelling moments throughout this story that I think are just so good. Some quotes I pulled out, the main one being, the decision may have been made by the few, Diago, but it's the will of the many that killed your family. Roll credits. A fair system only works if there's an unbiased means of assessing merit, and there is not pride or selfishness involved, which means that fair systems cannot exist where people are involved. So many good ones. Here's our spread. The will of the many. But yeah, the book ends on a crazy cliffhanger, and I can't wait for the next one to come out, and I will be reading it immediately. The next book that I read this month is When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, and this was just an absolutely lovely love story. So, this is one of the Bridgerton books. It follows Francesca, and Francesca's story is just so sad. It starts with her being married to John Sterling, and they are best friends with John's cousin, Michael, and out of nowhere, John dies. In his sleep, rather peacefully, but just dies. And obviously that is devastating for Francesca. And she has to get away. She's got to get out of here. All the while, Michael is in love with Francesca and has been in love with Francesca even from before she married John. And he has to bottle that up and keep it closed. Well, then John dies. And so then that makes Michael the new Earl, Duke, I don't know, whatever title they had. And so Michael, who was not raised to have this power, was not raised for this position, all of a sudden has it thrusted upon him. And he now has all this responsibility he never thought he was going to have. And he's sort of responsible for Francesca. Hard to be responsible for Francesca when he's in love with her. She leaves London, she leaves the city, and he decides to go on a 4-year trip to India. He decides to go traveling. So there's this big time skip. When they come back, Francesca's like, I can't be the Earl in charge of this situation anymore. Earl? I don't know. What was he? I don't know. I didn't write down what the title was. I don't think that really is consequential. So she comes back and decides, I need to find a husband because I really want children. Because she was unable to have children with John. And in the same season, Michael has decided he's going to find a wife because he needs to assume the position of his position in London, Earl, Duke, Viscount, whatever the hell he is. All the while, Michael is still in love with Francesca. And there's this awkwardness between them because he obviously has feelings for her. And she is starting to have feelings for him, but sort of in a way that, like, this was my best friend, but now that my husband is dead, he can't talk to me anymore. In Michael's head, it's, I need to stay away because I can't take Michael's life. I've already taken his title, I've taken his land, I've taken his house. I'm not going to take his wife too. And he sees that the only way for him to do that is to stay away from Francesca completely. Well, kind of impossible when they get back to town. It's really a little slow burning in some ways for them to get together. And they do. And it's sweet. And the whole time there is this reverence for John. And this, I need to have respect for John, especially on Michael's part. On paper, it doesn't sound great. Your husband dies, so then you marry his cousin. Right? Even in Regency era, it kind of is like, that sucks. But in the same vein, Michael and Francesca both loved John immensely. That was their best friend, their person. And so for each other, like, they are the only other person in the world who understands what each other is going through. So it just makes sense that they would come together in that way. And it's very sweet. Now, this book is spicy. In my opinion, having read all of the Bridgerton books, except for the last 2 thus far, Spice Central. God, very spicy. If you're not a huge fan of spice, I would avoid this one. Because the love story is so sweet, but Francesca and Michael are freaks. And Julia Quinn is also a freak. So, I mean, it's not like Fourth Wing Iron Flame spicy, but pretty spicy. It's up there. Like 4, maybe 5 out of 5 peppers. Okay. Eventually, Michael and Francesca do get together, and sort of before they make it official, Franny goes to John's grave and sort of confesses to John's grave that she loves Michael and that she's going to move on and be happy. And she confesses to John that she knows that John would approve of her and Michael being together, that Michael's going to take care of her. And it was just so sweet. And it was just such a happy ending. It really, to have such a sad start, it was such a happy ending. And I loved it so much. Sophia and Benedict's story is very good, but man, this was so sweet. I've said that a bunch, but it's true. I have 2 quotes. The first is Franny being a freak. She wanted this. She wanted him. And even though she knew it was wrong, she was too wicked to stop. He made her wicked. She a freak. And then the second one is so sweet. It's coming from John's mom at the very end of the book in the sort of epilogue section, where she is saying to Michael. Thank you, Michael, for letting my son love her first. Please. That's so sweet. Anyway, when he was a kid, 5 stars. I loved it so much. The next book that I read this month is my book club book for the month, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. You want to talk about a sweet freaking book. It is The House in the Cerulean Sea. I'm talking saccharine, sweet, rot your teeth out of your mouth, 5 root canals, so much sugar. It's so dang sweet. I loved it with my entire soul. On the Compile scale, it and The Will of the Many have the same rating. So the premise of The House in the Cerulean Sea is there is this guy who works for a government office called Daikami, the department in charge of magical youth. And he's very like normal SpongeBob, like going through the motions, doing what he has to do, where he goes and he evaluates orphanages that take care of magical children. He gets sent to this orphanage that is on this island that is filled with like the worst of the worst magical children. All of the kids that are there. Lucifer, the spawn of the devil. He goes by Lucy. He's 6-year-old. We have Chauncey, who is like a slime boy who wants to be a bellhop. We have Sal, who is a big, like, buff kid, but then he's a shapeshifter werewolf but he turns into a Pomeranian. Adorable. We have Theodore, who is a little baby wyvern dragon. We have Talia, who is a little gnome girl. And we have Fee, who is like a woodland sprite pixie girl. And they are taken care of by Arthur, who is sort of the master of the orphanage. And then there is another sprite who is sort of the owner of the island, named Zoe. So Linus Baker, our guy who works for Daikami, is going to this orphanage to see if it should remain open. And it's just a series of sweet little interactions where he's learning about the personalities of the children, learning about how the orphanage functions and all of these things. And Linus and Arthur have this cute little like subplot romance that's budding, and it's so adorable and tugs on your heartstrings. And we find out that Arthur is not who he says he is. He's actually a magical person as well. He's a phoenix, and he's one of the only phoenixes that live on the planet. That's a big shock to Linus, but it totally makes sense. And I clocked it very early on in the book. You know, this is an example of when cozy fantasy is fine. You know, one of my complaints when I was talking about Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries is that there were no stakes. Hey, truthfully, there weren't a lot of stakes in this book. But every single moment was just so freaking cute and adorable that I had to know what happened next. So, Linus falls in love with these children. Falls in love with this man. Falls in love with this entire situation. But is like, I still have to go back to the city. I have to finish my report. I have to go back to my old life. And tearfully, he leaves the kids. He leaves the orphanage. He goes back to, I think it's supposed to be like London or like New York. I don't know what city it's meant to emulate, but it reminds me of London. So he goes back to the city, and it's rainy and it's gloomy and everything sucks and everyone's mean and there's no sunshine, and it's very much a pathetic fallacy where it's rainy, stormy, gloomy in the city, but bright, sunny, and happy in the island with the kids. And he goes back and he gives his report to the upper management and is like, I think that this orphanage is perfect. It should stay open. There should be more like it. We need to overhaul the entire system. And they're like, mind your place. Well, then he kind of has this scene and he quits his job and he packs up all of his stuff and he rushes back to the island. And they're like, are you going to leave again? No? Come back. And they did. And then Arthur and Linus kiss. And Lucy is so freaking funny. He's like, are you guys going to kiss already? Come on. Snap, snap. I'm ready to see some things happen. And he's so mean, you know? Me and Lucy, we get each other. Truthfully, I was smiling and kicking my feet the entire time. It was just so good. And the sequel, Somewhere Beyond the Sea, so cute, comes out this month on September 10th. So I will be excited to pick that up as soon as it comes out. I made a spread for this book as well. Here we have it. We have basically the cover without the words, some fan art that some people on Pinterest drew of all the kiddos, and some other aesthetic pictures. And this one I didn't really write up any thoughts about it. I just picked out a bunch of quotes, and so I will put a few to share with you. This one's just relatable. He couldn't believe it was only Wednesday, and it was made worse when he realized it was actually Tuesday. That is relatable content right there. A lot of the themes of this book are revolving around prejudice, very like segregation type of vibe, and so a lot of the major themes is about that. And so one of the quotes that I have is, "How can we fight prejudice if we do nothing to change it? We allow it to fester. What's the point?" It is loud, but I think you'll learn it's because it's only a few people shouting, desperate to be heard. You might not ever be able to change their minds, but so long as you remember you're not alone, you will overcome. I found this funny and true. Linus was grimly amused by how prejudice didn't seem to be a match for profit. Sometimes, he thought to himself, in a house in the Cerulean Sea, you were able to choose the life you wanted. And if you were one of the lucky sort, sometimes that life chose you back. So sweet, a must read. You want a feel-good fantasy. And it's funny. And then the final book that I read this month is Sasaki and Miyano's Second Years. I gave this one 4 stars, and I liked it a lot better than the first years. Like the first years, I don't really know how to explain the plot because each chapter is just a different POV of people's thoughts during the plot of the manga. It's hard to talk about what happened in the book without also explaining everything that happens in the manga, and so I'm just not really going to get into it. I'm just going to share my thoughts. I liked this one a lot more because it actually felt like additional content. If you read the manga, then everything that sort of comes with it is like bonus material. And so I really liked that. And I think it was a bit better written this go around than the first years. And we got more of Sasaki's internal thoughts while he was with Miyano. And that's always something that I enjoy because it just shows how much she likes him. And for more than just thinking he's cute, you know? The quote I pulled out is actually from one of the friends talking about his girlfriend. And he says, "I saw the cosmos in the black depths of her hair, the night sky shimmering in her eyes." And I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Had nothing to do with the plot of Sasaki and Miyano, but gosh, so nicely written. So those are the books that I read in August, and the plot of them, and what I thought about them, and all of that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you read any of these books, please comment down below with your thoughts on them. And if you haven't read these but decided to watch my spoiler-filled review anyway, hey, thanks for hanging out. Like this video if you like this video, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I will see you when I see you. Peace out!